Let's go. Put a quick pause to this. Welcome to a muzzle chat. It's always a successful day when you hit the right button, right? Man, I'm excited to dive into more information with you all this beautiful day. Hope you're having a fantastic Sunday. I love you guys. I don't mean to instill fear, doom, gloom in any one of you. I just know collectively what we could accomplish together. And if we lose our health, we lose our function in this existence, we lose all quality of life. And that's where I'm even doing a shout out, like a call out to Charlie Kirk on this very episode. And this goes for any patriot, any individual with a megaphone. I don't even care if you're a gamer at this point. Anyone with an audience, you got a level of responsibility for humanity all around you and your loved ones, and you've been gifted and blessed a big platform. Well, let's stink and put it to use to actually bring light and health and real solutions for us all. It's insane that more people aren't challenging themselves on these narratives when it is clear as day that there are direct attacks on our freaking loved ones. And you and I included. We're all lumped in it. I don't know about you, but for me, I get more fueled up when I think about those I love than my self-serving self. Are you freaking kidding me? Unbelievable. So right here in this image, water vapors does not linger, disperse, and white out the entire sky. Look at that time lapse. That does not meet their very definition. It is time for us to open our minds and hearts and actually sit down, because for those that don't understand, if this is happening, you cannot afford to not do the proper deep dive and research. And I believe what we're going to play today, and if I have the time tomorrow, we're going to finish up the second half. We're going to take this actual documentary in bits and get through it. It provides all the evidence one would need to come to a definitive conclusion on this matter. And it just blows my mind that not enough of us are championing this narrative. So right here, you know what? I'll admit, I've actually started tuning into Charlie Kirk and his content less and less. Every now and then when I catch up on other patriots, and we can expose all that another time, the ones that have caught my fancy more so now than others, but you know, you have limited time. But every now and then I'll be all caught up on my list, and I'll occasionally, just as I'm showering or something, doing something, what's Charlie up to? And the one thing I really enjoy is his Q&A sessions, where he's in those environments, whether it's AmFest or on college campus, where he pretty much and it's beautiful that he'll allow people with disagreements to the front of the line to post questions. That is amazing. There's definitely some things I admire about that, but I don't want to get too in-depth in the weeds. I actually call any of you, any students out there, anyone that actually gets that opportunity, please steal this question. Please steal from me. Just take this narrative and pose this question, maybe even in your own words, to him. I mean, if you want to throw a plug to a muzzle chat in the process, thank you. You're a freaking rock star, because we are on the front lines with this narrative, and we're just trying to ramp up the pressure on those with blessed platforms to tackle this narrative. So right here, Charlie Kirk, I have a disagreement, not so much with what you do, but how you're going about it. The globalists, the World Economic Forum states, quote, humans are now hackable animals. And also, quote, they have the technology to control the masses, end quote. Among equally concerning things like other statements, nanotech, all these other things of controlling humans from within, under the skin, unbelievable things that you just have to hear for yourself. So kind of the question / concern to Charlie is, don't you suppose that if you were completely effective in what you are doing here with everything he's engaged in, without properly addressing health, that they, the World Economic Forum, the globalists, would simply ramp up the attacks on our health like they are. And that's today's episode. We're going to bring that proof. And anyone with eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart to absorb will see that they're ramping up these tactics. Wouldn't this completely render Charlie's plans pointless? Meaning, if we lose our health and function, game over. Now what's the point of Turning Point USA? Don't get me wrong, everything, Charlie, you're doing is fan-freaking-tastic, but if you're not paralleling the importance of health alongside of all the awakening you're a part of, what's the point? In a sense, you're forcing evil's hand to ramp up the deterioration of our health. So as you become more successful, you're kind of forcing their hand to everyone else's detriment in these angles of attack. And the band-aids, the detox, the sourcing nutrition, the supplementation, all that will only go so far, dang it. We must address the direct attacks. And there's nothing conspiratorial about it. Is that what's ramping up the fear with a lot of these individuals with these big platforms? They feel like they're going to be discredited. They're worried about name calling. They're worried about being called a conspiracy theorist. Get out of here. Bring it on. I'll wear that as a badge of honor. So with that, I obviously respect the movement in which Charlie Kirk is a part of creating. Thus, the reason I pose this very concern. If him and others blessed with the spotlight tackle these threats, I feel we can more so effectively put a stop to the poisoning of the air, clean up our water, our food, our vaccinations, big pharma, biological warfare, the frequency tactics, etc., etc., etc. Point is, with proper health, we all naturally will be in a place to really address all aspects to our lives, country, world, and our God. Would love to share all the concerns that have been brought to my attention. Let's have a real chat. Charlie Kirk, reach out to amuzzlechat@gmail.com. Dan Bongino, Stu Peters, freaking anyone blessed with a platform. Are you kidding me? I welcome you all, even if it's an opposing view. Let's have real debate. Let's have a real conversation. You can debunk. Try debunking what they're doing. I'm pretty sure today's episode, once again, will be incredibly definitive as to what is happening within our skies. And there's no hiding from that, folks. To dismiss yourself, oh, I'm just going to be realistic with the sphere of influence we have. Are you kidding me? What would you do if a stranger was coming into your home and directly poisoning your loved ones? What would you do? Because the reality of it is, there is a stranger that's coming into your home and poisoning all your loved ones. No one is immune to this tactic, and that's why we all have a role to play in it. I don't get why we're dismissing ourselves over actual war propaganda that Google is fighting against, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all the tyrannically owned, propagandized war platforms of today with the infringement of censorship. Let's actually dive on that. Why is this topic so censored? Why have I experienced just as much censorship on this very topic as vaccines being biological weapons, or even strictly mentioning vaccines have led to deaths? That in and of itself gets censored on platforms. Why are they censoring the chemtrails? Think about it. If they in fact weren't doing it at all, think about it. They would have no reason to infringe upon our freedom of speech and put themselves in a hot seat, infringing upon our God-given freedoms, constitutionally, the Bill of Rights, all those infringements. They would just simply sit back and laugh. What harm could we do to them if this was something they weren't doing? What harm would it do to impose bans with $1 million fines, life imprisonment on any singular offense that is deemed potentially harmful to any of us? Why wouldn't we stand up that ban globally? today. If they're not doing it, what do they have to fear? The only reason that they would tyrannically censor is because, in fact, it's something they're doing, they deem valuable, they deem effective on multiple layers. We could peel back that onion, and today's episode will, in fact, peel that back quite deeply. So they're admitting essentially what they're doing. If we really just understand the level of tyrannical censorship, that they in fact are doing this, and they want to continue it as much as they more and more as we're gaining traction and giving it more exposure. They're ramping up the censorship. It tells us one thing. So once again, to all those patriots doing all these things that aren't properly. Sure, Charlie will talk about a diet he's done and lost weight and yada yada, and health being important to an extent, but not properly addressing it, not properly addressing all the angles of attack. It is crucial that we get these individuals and start ramming these questions. So please steal this question. When you get an opportunity, pose it to him. I'd venture to say you would go viral. Plug yourself, whatever it is you're engaged in, because that will be a pretty amazing question to pose. That being said, maybe I should have just had this playing in the background the whole time, but how much more must we see before folks are willing to come to terms with the actual truth? Will it be too late? I sure hope not. Fact of the matter is, on our last episode regarding this war tactic, is there were amazing sources that were uncovered, and there's direct states. You could go through the list. We'll retouch on them later in this episode, where you can get involved. You can email out to your representatives or even sheriffs and get the ball rolling. There's so many sources to get involved. So much information. This was a new one. We didn't plug this. Save Our Skies. And then this climate viewer map. Very interesting. So I have more research to do on these myself, and I look forward to it. But my gosh, folks, let's just consider for a second. Look at this tiny little aircraft. Look what it's admitting. Okay? Could you imagine? Look how tiny that is. Look at this plume. Imagine for a second if our vehicles did something similar to this. They would address it. They would calm down on us so quickly. So even pose for a second. Let's say it isn't spray. Let's say it isn't some nefarious agenda. The simple fact it's happening to this level that's impacting people's solar production, things like that, it's gravely concerning nonetheless. So if this is a type of emission, which it's not, it's not. But if it were, why wouldn't we be pressuring them to clean this freaking up? Because it is. It's undeniable that it is painting our sky. It's blanketing our sky. Irregardless, it's having a greater impact than we can even fathom, folks. So, but when you look at the facts and you realize how damning it is for all life on Earth, among many other things, just even Earth cycles, then it ramps up the proper sense of urgency to address these issues. But look at the image here, folks. How could we pose this question to you? How could we, if we were intentionally trying to create the biggest cloud of smoke we can from a jet, just for fun, for an air show, how could we improve upon it any more than that? We couldn't. So why are we lying to ourselves? They've already perfected it. That is maximum coverage that they can get out of a freaking aircraft. And when you find out the actual particles it's spraying, it will shock you to the core. That being said, enough of that. Right here, I believe it's a second link in the description below. Amazing. Geoengineering Watch. This webpage has so much. But this right here, the dimming, is the documentary we're going to be diving into. So without further ado, let's dive in. I'm going to have to change the audio setting because this track has had a lot of reverb. So I have to, whatever. I need a freaking tech guru over here. I tell you what, this one-man band is not easy. So bear with me. I'll kill this music. I got to change the audio setting. I didn't have echo cancellation on. So there was probably reverb in that whole introduction on the soundtrack. My gosh, to toggle all of this continuously throughout an episode is not an easy thing. Unbelievable. I'm human. Forgive me. Oh, this is so good, folks. Oh my gosh. As I choke and die, let me just give some data that this goes over. It is incredible. Yeah, let's address the elephant in our skies yet again. Drive this home. Share this with the world. It's interesting how I ebb and flow personally in the attitude I have regarding this. One minute I'll be fuming. Next minute I'll be laughing because coming to terms with my sphere of influence. I can only do what I could do. And that's a little more healthy place to be, I must admit. And I'm going to try my best to stay in that. But anyway, it goes over a lot of the patents, okay? The history of patents behind everything in our skies actually being patented. Unbelievable. And the historical testing operations, the climate engineering, the geoengineering, the nanomaterials, okay? The testing that has taken place at altitude, stratosphere, and beyond, finding the same materials in all the geoengineering patents. Unbelievable, right? Governments all over the globe have openly called for this extreme measure to combat the global warming hoax. Unbelievable. We must unite and fight against this ASAP. Experts have also stated and are now saying, on top of all other human impacts and threats to our existence, this threat, mathematically, statistically speaking, is now the greatest threat we face, short of nuclear cataclysm. I think I said that right. You get the point. Yet, most of us are too busy, are too brainwashed. This is too polarized. I can't even consider talking to this in my family. What is it? Do we even care? We too busy as they continue to roll this out. We continue to be sprayed and poisoned every single day. How does this even make sense? What is going on with all of us? Talk is cheap for those that have not properly investigated this topic. So someone that just wants to chalk me up as a conspiracy theorist, go right ahead. That's hilarious because it's like, what effort have you put in? And if someone put hours in strictly on Google and other provenly propagandist platforms, like, I'm sorry, you got misled. There's other data out there. We must learn to vet information. And the only way we're going to have a chance at getting the proper information is on free speech platforms. That's why I'm such a huge advocate for Rumble. Even X has shown its colors now. Unbelievable. Once they achieved what they have going into the election, it seems like Elon has greatly stepped up and censored a lot and banned a lot and shadow banned a lot of patriots on the front lines, more so on specific topics. More on that in the future, not so much now. But it's just to touch on the point. Like, you think for a second that I want this to be the reality of the world we live in, the truth? No, you'd greatly be mistaken. I wish this wasn't the hand we were dealt, but not addressing that hand that is being dealt is a non-option. It's just not even an option, folks. So please hear the credible and well-decorated whistleblowers for yourself. Many of them show up in this very documentary. How is it that the freaking lies are keeping folks from hearing the truth? Can't folks see the very sources that said safe and effective regarding other products and demonized the products that and protocols that saved lives and helped lives and the doctors that were informing us? these same sources are the same ones publishing and pushing the contrail narrative. So, and calling chemtrails conspiratorial, unbelievable. The talking heads, the newspapers, the government officials, the social media platforms, Google, and all their censorship, tyrannical censorship, really tells us all. The fact is, they wouldn't even risk infringing on our First Amendment if this were not true. I know it's a bit repetitive, but I got to get through my notes. I challenge you to pull out a notepad as we go through today's episode. It helps putting pen to paper for things to sink in. And don't take any of our word for it. Do your own research. So, I mean, other things it goes over. HARP, other methods, programs being used to 100% manipulate weather. These microwave frequencies are so dang dangerous as well. And too many of us are, what should we say, willfully staying ignorant. Let's cut that out. I've been wrong. I've been duped. That's a healthy place. That's a firm foundation to build upon. Let's go. Look at these patents, folks. Pause whenever you feel the need. We're going to go 1.25. Oh yeah, there we go. Wow. Wow.
Perhaps the greatest lie ever perpetrated on populations all over the world is the condensation trail lie. What we're seeing in our skies is not condensation. It's sprayed particulate dispersions with very few exceptions.
They shouldn't be there. Jet engines burn clean. So if there's anything coming out of them, it's an additive.
They're absolutely not contrails. Contrails do not linger, dissipate, and go into cloud coverage, period, in the report.
Love it.
And I kept saying to people, what is this? Because now the sky is no longer blue. It's starting to turn gray. And what I found was kind of like it was not socially acceptable. We're all going to pretend this is not really happening. And I thought, oh, this is very bad.
Most are unfamiliar with the science term called global dimming. That term refers to the amount of direct sunlight that no longer reaches the surface of the planet due to light scattering particles that are building up in the atmosphere. And although many of these particles are from industrialized pollution, the larger majority are from the ongoing climate engineering solar radiation management operations.
Look at that. Come on. Right there. Okay, so they do more so strategically put the nozzles into the exhaust, giving us the deception as though at least it's coming from the engines. It could be smog, it could be emissions, it could be their definition of water vapors and ice crystallization. But not all aircraft have that. Some actually emit this trail from the wing tip, from the tail of the plane. I'd imagine this aircraft has nozzles outfitted all along. This is live footage, undoctored imagery that we can digest with our own eyes, and it doesn't fit their stinking narrative because it's not even coming from the engine, directly from the engines on this aircraft. Unbelievable. Wow.
This engine, a high bypass turbofan jet engine, this is the engine that is on all military tankers and all commercial carriers, is in essence a jet-powered fan. 90% of the air that moves through this engine is non-combusted. This engine by design is nearly incapable of producing any condensation trail except under rare and extreme circumstances. And we have film footage of aircraft flying at altitude with nozzles visible, turning on and off.
Look at that, right there.
That is the end of the argument.
That's the end of the argument right there. Folks, whether that was a clogged nozzle, whether that was toggling a switch or switching from one bank spray compound to another, to be determined. But that gives us the visual evidence that this is not natural, that this is intentional spray. Once again, how else could we magnify if this was the intention anymore? The way it disperses and blankets the whole sky. Come on. They've admitted themselves that they need to do this and consider this and all the presentations and how it will lead to death, dysfunction, loss of life. But could we afford, in their words, could we afford not to do it? Is like, what freaking mad scientist insanity is that, folks? Come on. They didn't get our consent and they're experimenting on us. And I believe it's beyond experimentation at this point that they have honed in on certain batches that are giving them the outcomes they want. They themselves have said this is a very cheap method to fight climate change. Very cheap. It's in the billions, but it's cheap to them and these organizations. Like, we can't fathom it, but there's a lot of hurdles we could put up. It's healthy. Let's put up and challenge these narratives and put up walls. Well, why would they do it? What incentivization do they have? And these are good questions. As we continue through information like this, it addresses all of it, so much of that at the end of this very documentary. If you have any additional questions, that's why Notepad's so crucial. Please drop them in the comments, reach out to unmuzzledchat@gmail.com. Let's address those together.
Since even before man could fly, there was an effort to try to modify the weather. We have weather modification patents going back 100 years plus.
Wow.
These are historical films of what can be done with a biplane. A small biplane that carries a very small payload. And that much can be done. How much more can a fully loaded military tanker, KC-10, KC-135, C-17 Globemaster, how much more material can they put in the air? About 500 times more.
Yeah, we're seeing it.
In regard to the condensation trail narrative, many refer back to the trails left by World War II bombers as proof that we are only seeing condensation trails in our skies. But geoengineeringwatch.org found on military archives film footage, which we posted, of World War II B-17s at altitude turning off a sprayed dispersion. We know that climate engineering was deployed immediately after World War II, so testing was absolutely ongoing.
Wow.
Clearly, these bombers were used for beta testing. Film footage proves it.
That's the end.
Weather was a weapon used.
We don't need to continue. What else do we need to know? Golly. Well, there's a lot of important information to know.
Over Vietnam. Would you expect that to be then deleted from the availability? No. To continue to expand the scientific aspects of
Air
it,
Force,
to have it available
Major
in
General.
your portfolio of weapons would be a natural process. Therefore, should you expect that it is available on demand to have the ability to modify weather? Absolutely. Within this country and others.
Climate engineering is the crown jewel of the military-industrial complex. Climate engineering has been used to destabilize and topple nations all over the globe, facilitating military occupations by hostile countries like the U.S. We know that some of these countries are having their precipitation cut off because they have stated so on the floor of the UN, like the president of Iran stating emphatically that NATO weather modification programs were cutting off the precipitation to Iran, but U.S. media never covered it.
We have an economic model operating globally, which is operating based on covert force. And I have very serious questions after watching the financial patterns as to whether that financial force or that force includes weather warfare.
People were coming to me, telling me about this. So because of that, I went to the government in Ottawa under Freedom of Information. There was a 40-page report, of which half the pages were completely blank, and the other half had a lot of blank outs.
Wow.
But there was sufficient information to tell me that, yeah, they're aware. They call it geoengineering.
One of the big problems is that when we find some new technology, we get all excited by it, by the potential benefits of that technology, and often implement it and use the technology before we have any idea of the negative effects.
Shouldn't it be considered that every breath we take is laden with highly toxic particles that are wreaking havoc in our own bodies, particles that aren't being reported by any air quality testing systems? Any official air quality testing are looking for PM10 or PM2.5, 2.5 microns at best. The climate engineering nanoparticulates are exponentially smaller. They go virtually unreported.
These nanomaterials generate reactive oxygen species in biological materials, damage tissue, lead to advanced aging, cause cancer, causative agents of dementia. So, yeah, we might think that we're doing something positive for humanity to save our species, but we're also poisoning ourselves.
Eventually, with the team that we formed at geoengineeringwatch.org, we were able to acquire a NOAA flying lab. We were able to test at altitude to confirm the elements that were showing up at the surface.
Our intention was to do a point-to-point sampling mission. We could see these obvious patterns that were being laid down in the sky. We were really thankful for the opportunity to be able to get up to altitude. And on the return mission, we noticed that that cloud layer had descended. And we sampled below the cloud layer, we sampled through that confluent layer and above it.
We found exactly the same elements listed in climate engineering patents. The same elements we found on countless surface tests of precipitation from all over the globe.
Wow. They bring it all, folks. Wow.
Governments all over the globe and the entire climate science community are telling the population urgently that climate engineering operations, solar radiation management operations need to be immediately deployed to try to mitigate the warming of our planet, to try to preserve what's left of its life support systems.
Look at all those articles. They've acknowledged and stated it themselves.
And yet when the public, those that are awake, try to bring to the attention of academia and elected officials that we see climate engineering already being conducted in our skies all over the globe. It's already been deployed. Lab tests prove it. Film footage proves it. Documents prove it. And yet we have the continued denial from the climate science community and official agencies telling us that we're not really seeing what we're seeing in the skies. They tell us if climate engineering were deployed, it would look exactly like what we're seeing in our skies. But then again, they tell us that we're not really seeing what we are actually seeing.
Right.
The paradox is the more the climate engineers spray.
Look, that one's even emitting from the tail itself. It's a little puffer. It's not quite as pronounced as the ones integrated into the engine exhaust by deception. But look at that.
The planet, destroy the ozone layer, disrupt the hydrological cycle, and increase the overall warming of the planet. The more they feel they have to ramp these programs up to try to mitigate some of the damage that these programs have done in the first place. That is the true definition of insanity.
As a society,
yeah,
we are like a freight train heading for a broken bridge that is just a few years away from us. And I think
I'm sorry for the folks that don't have the patience to sit through this, as though this isn't happening to you, as though this isn't impacting your every aspect of your life and your loved ones. Yeah, you got more important things to do. Go watch football. I don't even know if football's on. Just the when you really absorb this tactic and how it's taking place, it actually shifts one's priorities in the order it should be. And there's a lot of individuals that, it's important to get your rest, but shouldn't rest till this is properly addressed. It is crucial. My mind's blown, folks.
I think people don't understand the exponential increase of toxicity in the environment.
These operations should be considered the most insane endeavor ever deployed by the human race.
Look at that.
These operations are systematically derailing all of Earth's life support systems.
Oh my God.
In the attempt to blot out the sun. The myopic, short-term objective of trying to cool the planet while worsening.
Who saw skies like this as a kid? None of us. Well, one's my age and older, at least. Unbelievable. We are so easily put in a pot of hot water and just nuked. The very impacts of this type of tactic limits the ability to even acknowledge what's going on. It's impacting our brain function, our cognitive function, our memory. So where it's even harder to reflect back, man, did I ever see these growing up? No, you didn't. Not to this magnitude.
The overall warming. The climate engineers, if these operations are allowed to continue, are pounding the nails into our collective coffins.
From a scientific perspective, and what we know about nanomaterials and their effect on human health and the environment, this is a serious problem. And it really does warrant further scientific investigation.
We need the answers to get to the bottom of this national security problem.
if populations around the globe find out what has been done to them by their governments without their knowledge or their consent, there will be a shockwave around the globe that cannot be contained by the criminal governments that have now taken control of our planet and civilizations all over the world.
Yes,
just bringing transparency will shift so many things that it will make it extremely difficult, because you cannot manage an entire planet with overt force, only with covert force. If we bring transparency to who it is in the covert force, it shifts everything.
That's it. Right there. That's a mic drop. We cannot stop till we gain full transparency, and it does go beyond the scope of this war tactic, fully to every aspect of our lives.
Look at your own health, and you know what is going on. And if you love your children, join us in fighting what we need to fight. This is a just fight. It's the right fight. It's the right cause.
And if the climate engineering operations, which are derailing Earth's life support systems, are not immediately exposed and halted, all other challenges for the human race become moot, because the planet will no longer support life.
There it is,
we are
Charlie.
in completely uncharted territory. Virtually the entire web of life is being systematically contaminated and decimated by the ongoing climate engineering operations. On top of
Great. Charlie, you now became effective, waking up a whole generation as to the indoctrination and getting people to use their brains to a degree as it's becoming diminished. And then once people, what level of dysfunction do we need to be at? That's a problem. As we continually end up poisoned, we end up at a place clearly it's never easier than today to address these issues. It's going to be compoundingly more difficult with time. That's where it's like, if these patriots don't start infusing the importance of our health and also getting on board, because dude, this is pen to paper solution here. Through state officials, through sheriffs, we ramp up the pressures. We all got it. This is our skies. No one's immune to this type of war tactic, so we all take it serious. It's just pen to paper. We get bans everywhere, and it'll be that much easier if it continues, obviously, to now create ground to air defense. Do you know the governors within states have the National Guard ability to actually deploy aircraft to land these jets, land these planes, do thorough investigations? Once the ban's in place, man, that is, let's not stop till we get to that place. Once again, the more individuals with big platforms we can help push this narrative, I believe that could be such a big move that we'll start seeing instant bans state by state by state. Now, Tennessee achieved it. Illinois is trying, Florida, North Carolina, South Dakota. I might have confused those two, but all over the place. There's like seven states, I believe, as of right now. It's just so crucial. I'm sorry, I'm disrupting a bit much. Let's continue.
Of all other forms of human activity or anthropogenic activity that are wreaking havoc in the web of life, climate engineering, mathematically, statistically speaking, is the single greatest and most immediate threat we collectively face, short of nuclear cataclysm.
Sounds like pure science fiction, but there is a growing underground movement of people who believe that our harsh drought is part of a government conspiracy.
Here, outlandish ideas like weather warfare and climate engineering, in other words, weather control, are accepted as basic fact.
Climate engineering is the greatest single assault on the environment ever launched by humanity, without question.
Dane Wigginton, lead researcher for Geoengineering Watch, is sounding the alarm. Climate engineering, they say, is to blame for the harshest recorded drought in California history. Dane is used to skeptics. He once was one himself.
Talk is cheap for those that haven't investigated. I didn't want to believe this either.
Boom.
His background is in solar power, but he started investigating on his own about a decade ago. After becoming suspicious, something was partially blocking the sun's energy from reaching his solar home.
I grew up in Southern California, choking in a sea of smog. None of the adults around me seemed concerned about the conditions, but for me, life in the toxic murk was intolerable. I have always fully recognized the immense damage being inflicted on the planet by countless forms of human activity. I lectured on anthropogenic global warming. I dreamt of clean air and blue skies. I dreamt of living in untainted wilderness off the grid. I dreamt of planting trees and watching them grow and thrive. I dreamt of coexisting with the wild inhabitants of the forest. I finally made it to the serene setting I had craved for so long, a remote forested mountaintop in Northern California. But the dream soon turned to a nightmare. When I began to lose significant amounts of my solar power uptake from my off-grid wilderness home, I knew something was radically wrong.
Wow.
We are officially told that the aircraft-emitted trails in our skies that linger, spread, and sometimes cover the entire horizon are just condensation. But the condensation trail narrative is perhaps the greatest lie ever perpetrated on populations all over the world. It is not possible for condensation to block at times 60, 70, even 80% of my solar power uptake.
Wow.
I began to research the issue of geoengineering, aka climate engineering, programs that governments around the globe and in climate science communities have told us are only proposals. Yet, there they were in the skies above me. Even today, we are being told, falsely, by the climate science community that we have one final card to play to try to avert total climate collapse, total planetary meltdown, but this is in fact a lie. Climate engineering, weather modification patents go back more than 100 years, but all available data indicates that programs were first deployed at scale immediately after World War II and deployed over the polar regions in the attempt to increase the size of the polar ice packs and thus try to regulate Earth's temperatures.
It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Numerous government documents posted at geoengineeringwatch.org, some as much as 800 pages long, prove that global governments, even governments that the public perceives as being adversarial, are in fact colluding and cooperating on the climate engineering issue due to the cross-border ramifications. You can't climate engineer over your own country without affecting the entire planet. They are all working together on these issues, and other governments around the globe are either actively or passively cooperating.
Is the government experimenting with our weather? People say the government is up there in airplanes spraying all kinds of chemicals to change or manipulate the weather.
It is called geoengineering, fighting global warming by putting a chemical dust in the atmosphere and reflecting harmful radiation back into space.
You could use barium oxide, for example, which makes big fluffy clouds. You could use tiny little bits of aluminum, which is benign in the environment, and essentially manage the climate.
There are 172 bills before the U.S. Senate right now calling for more weather modification programs.
A Weather Modification Act calling for research in, quote, attempting to change or control by artificial methods the natural development of atmospheric cloud forms.
My personal opinion is that we have to keep geoengineering on the table. We have to look at it very carefully because we might get desperate enough to want to use it.
There is a line of research on what's called geoengineering, which are various techniques that would delay the heating to buy us 20 or 30 years to get our act together.
The stated goal of some of the world's most recognized geoengineers, like Dr. David Keith and Dr. Ken Caldera, is to put 10 to 20 million tons of nanoparticulates into global skies annually. That's an inconceivable amount of material. This material is on top of industrialized pollution.
Right? This is about how we engineer the planet. It's about the fact, an uncomfortable fact, but it is a fact, that we have the technical ability to do this. They are all fast-acting, they are cheap, and they're fundamentally imperfect.
Cheap.
Because of how you control something where an individual country can have tremendous leverage over the whole planet's climate, and where there are winners and losers in ways that really could be unpredictable. And I mean, not to frighten you, but I think you can imagine scenarios that lead to war.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection.
There's all sorts of ways you could do this, but the standard idea has always been spray sulfuric acid in the stratosphere 20 kilometers over our head and use that to stop the planet warming up.
The example many people cite was when the Mount Pinatubo volcano exploded, and all of this ash went into the air and had a cooling effect on the Earth.
And so people have long proposed since the mid-60s that you could artificially add dust to the stratosphere and cool the planet. Not that this would be a good solution for global warming, it would not. But it does show the way we're steadily developing the powers to manipulate the planet with comparative ease. That sulfur in the lower atmosphere is masking some of the climate warming from CO2. So
is this the global dimming or something?
Yeah.
Other leading ideas basically to emulate what big volcanoes do, put material in the stratosphere to reflect sunlight.
So the problem is the following. If you add SO2 to the stratosphere, SO2 doesn't condense. So you might want to put alumina in. Alumina has a very high nature of refraction. It's very small. It doesn't coagulate. And you can engineer particles that have particular properties. You can get them above the stratosphere. You can concentrate particles near the poles. Costs are so cheap that the richest people on the planet could perhaps afford to buy an ice age. It's extraordinarily cheap. I knew it was cheap when I found that they were quoting me in tons. It's also true that particles, as they get bigger, fall out a lot faster. We sort of step back and think, okay, well, how would you actually make particles in the stratosphere? This is really engineering now. If it was aerosols in the stratosphere, it would likely be put there by airplanes. Start with a fleet of just 2 or 3 kind of modified business jets. The basic idea is that if you let a plume off in an aircraft by just changing some little details, you can actually get much smaller particle size distributions by doing this kind of spraying. So there are all sorts of side effects. I'll get to them in a second. But if you put sulfuric acid in the stratosphere, for example, you could deplete stratospheric ozone. Smaller size means more surface area, but more surface area means less ozone.
Is the stuff in the stratosphere going to be killing some number of people that are going to be sacrificed?
It's an obvious obvious concern.
If it kills 1 million people and we're only doing 1% more, we're just killing 10,000 more people.
You can do math.
Okay.
But that's, so killing people is not the objective here. So if I made a decision, if there was a collective...
But they just admitted it would kill people, diminish our abilities to even function, folks.
Decision to do a geoengineering program, and you put, say, the kind of program I think makes more sense to put about 1 million tons a year in, but let's say you might end up killing many tens of thousands of people a year as a direct result of that decision.
And so the only
tens of thousands, many tens of thousands,
to cool the planet, or that society can do to cool the planet, is deploy these sorts of technologies.
And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard. It's more like free riding on our grandkids. And it means there are going to be winners and losers, just like there are winners and losers for CO2. But they're different winners and losers. So this makes the problem, if anything, harder to solve. You've introduced another dimension of complexity into the managing the planet's climate problem.
What we're watching financially is a great deal of public policy being promoted on the theory that we have climate change. And yet in that discussion, we never talk about, well, what's all this spraying and how is that involved? Engineering the weather gives you the ability to overcome or prevent droughts. It gives you the ability to inflict them if you don't go along. And the brilliance of inflicting a drought is there's no popular support against you. So this kind of invisible warfare, if it can be done, is very effective, it would seem to me, both positive and negative. Well, imagine if you can predict the weather over long periods of time, how much money you can make. You know, you can trade it.
Yep. Wow.
How do you manage money in that world?
Many people message me confused and bewildered as to how it is possible that such colossal programs can occur in skies above our heads, programs of climate engineering and solar radiation management that are literally decimating Earth's life support systems, and these programs are not being acknowledged by any official source, not being acknowledged by the climate science community that has indeed betrayed the human race and the entire web of life by their denial of the ongoing climate engineering elephant in our skies. And the people that message me are perplexed at how such atrocities can be ongoing for so many decades. And we have still official denial, and we have populations that are all too willing to accept that denial. I began to test for some of the primary elements named in climate engineering solar radiation management patents, starting with aluminum, barium, and strontium. When my test came back from the state-certified lab, to my dismay, these elements indeed were present in significant amounts, and subsequent tests showed higher and higher and higher amounts, continuing to escalate until one test was as high as 3,450 parts per billion of aluminum. This is highly toxic rain. I knew my life would never be the same because I can't look the other way. It's completely intolerable for me to live under toxic skies. And what about the trees? What about the bats, the bears, the birds, the bees? They have no voice except for us. I began to try to bring this issue to light from that moment on. Initially, few would listen, few would look at the data. But as time went on, and as more and more people woke up along the way and realized the significance of attempting to play God with the weather and engineer Earth's life support systems, more individuals from different arenas joined the effort to try to sound the alarm.
I want to tell you that we're in very great danger from the pollution that's coming down over us. And we've been led astray by the military-industrial complex.
100%.
And they're responsible for the cloud's creation and weather manipulation programs.
I sacrificed 4 years of my life defending the people of my country just to come home and find there are greater threats here domestically.
There's something going on. I don't know who it is or why they're doing it. All I can testify is it's not natural and it's not normal.
Now, the aluminum content of rain should be 0.
And there's a lot of argument that aluminum is very common to be found, but aluminum is only common in a bonded form. It's not common in a free form, and we're finding high rates of free aluminum.
Right.
Because you can spread so many small little particles through the environment, it dramatically increases the surface area that's in that environment because there's so many of them. When you look up at the sun and you see a white haze, that is aluminum floating in the air right now, and it's coming from the aircraft.
Solar radiation management, SRM, to block the sun. That's the stated purpose. The consequences don't seem to be considered with these programs, but that is the stated purpose on almost all UN and global governance documents for these programs.
And in the past 5 years, I have seen the number of patients with Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative diseases tremendously increase, almost quadruple.
United States code says you cannot experiment on the American public, and if you do, you got to report it to Congress within 30 days. Where's the proof that you did that?
But it's also to get the media to start reporting on this.
Diseases.
So all of us have a consequence that we may not be aware of. And it is important for all of us to join together and to put a stop to these programs and to hold public discussions on them for as much as possible. And I want all of you to know that it's important that we realize that this is not normal and natural, that these are programs, experimental programs that are being conducted at this time, and we all have to stand up and say no.
It can be used for disseminating all types of agents.
Nothing new.
Spray from aircraft using the Aero X-2A has proved very effective in field trials. For larger planes, the Air Force has perfected spray equipment. This B-17 has several spraying nozzles and carries the tank in the bomb bay.
I'm Charles Jones, Brigadier General, U.S. Air Force retired. In the years 1953 through 1962, I was stationed in Germany. Then we moved to England in 1959 while assigned to the 42nd Tactical Reconnaissance Squadron with dual missions of electronic countermeasures and weather reconnaissance. We also had the responsibility of reporting jet engine contrails throughout our area of responsibility in Europe, North Africa, the Mediterranean, and Eastern Atlantic. We were responsible for pinpointing the exact altitudes of all jet engine contrails noted within the flying area of responsibility in both the weather and ECM aircraft missions. We became experts on jet engine aircraft contrails and all of their characteristics. Much different from the white aircraft spray trails that consist of scientifically verifiable spraying of aluminum particles and other toxic heavy metals, polymers, and chemical components. These are the long white spray trails that linger and slowly expand into light cloud cover that soon cover entire areas with an overcast, very light cloud cover. We're never going to get to the bottom of climate change until everything is laid on the table about geoengineering and the disasters that it can and is causing.
Wow.
My name is Richard Rolig. I served a career of 34 years in the United States Air Force. I was able to achieve the rank of Major General. I was in the acquisition business of developing new weapon systems and did lead one major top secret program for 3 years. During the 10 years I worked at Raytheon, the exposure to various programs was limited to what they wanted you to work on. So even though I still had the top secret clearance and certain programs I got exposed to, that was not one of them. That was compartmentalized, as it should be, and unless you had a direct impact or you were personally involved in it, you would not have received that particular clearance. It goes back to around October of 17. I'm residing near an Air Force base here in Tucson, Arizona, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. Aircraft exiting, doing their flight training, etc. And having lived around Air Force my whole life, my father even being a pilot, it became obvious to me that...
Is someone in denial that this is not what's being projected out of aircraft, that this is just natural? Because if you actually watched the sky, there isn't a natural cloud in the sky. This is 100% being emitted from the aircraft. So with that, it should raise enough concern. Well, shoot, what might be in that? Could it potentially be harmful? Is it potentially spray, or is it just naturally coming out? Why do we have all the emissions on our vehicles down here as far as smog, but yet that's the outcome of aircraft? It leads you. These questions are so healthy and so profound and so important that we all ask ourselves, because once again, we all live under these skies. And on this nano spectrum, as far as aluminum and barium and strontium and nanoplastics, we absorb that. And why is Alzheimer's, dementia, things of that nature, all this chronic illness ramping up? This 100% is attributed to so much of that. We just heard the experts talk about how tens of thousands, many tens of thousands are going to die from this type of tactic. It's a war tactic. And it isn't fighting a hoax. It's got more nefarious intentions. I mean, it just becomes clear. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. When you gather enough of the information, the intent is clear.
The contrails that were coming out of some of the aircraft in the local area were not normal looking. They took on a different texture. They spread differently. Yep. And so as a result, I started talking to a couple ex-pilots that are part of the organizations, asked them to look at it. My wife is a pilot. I had brought her out of the house. We looked at the contrails, and it was obvious that they were not normal. So as a result, we started doing a little research.
Yeah, we called it the elephant in the sky. I mean, everybody on the planet is looking up and seeing this kind of spraying going on. I became involved in weather modification analysis due to my background as a weather observer in the United States Air Force. And as I was looking at the jet clouds in the sky, I realized that that's certainly not normal. And so I've been watching these abnormal clouds for a long time.
Well, I started to learn about geoengineering just in a very personal way. I decided to leave Washington in 1998. I bought a small property in a farming community in Tennessee, and I still had business in Washington, and so I would drive back and forth between Tennessee and Washington, but I was also driving around the country networking with a variety of people, trying to understand what was going on in the economy. And as I was driving around, I saw this spraying, and literally you had planes crisscrossing in very unusual patterns. Back, they'd fly back and forth, and you get this tapestry of crisscross spraying that would just hang in the sky for a long time. As an investment person, you're adding it up in your mind. Okay, we have 2 planes over this county, flying this many hours and spraying this much stuff. This is very expensive. Who's paying for this? And I was doing a lot of research at the time on a great deal of money that was going missing from the federal government on a covert basis. On one hand, you have all this money going missing, and on the other hand, you have this fantastically expensive spraying program going on.
The ongoing global climate engineering operations must be considered a new Manhattan Project on a scale that is almost inconceivable. Governments all over the globe are either actively or passively participating in the ongoing climate engineering insanity, all for their own reasons, all in the attempt to keep business as usual until the last possible moment.
Geoengineering is occurring, it's been occurring, it is not new, and your tax dollars are funding this.
Well, my name is Kristen Megan Edwards. I am a U.S. Air Force veteran. I served 9 years on active duty working in bioenvironmental engineering. Upon my separation, which was honorably, I went and worked for the VA in the Veterans Health Administration as an industrial hygienist and an environmental specialist.
Wow.
So as an industrial hygienist, my job was to protect people from such things as heavy carcinogenic metals and hazardous materials. And through that, all items that came on base was approved through what is called an Air Force Form 3952, and that is a hazardous materials acquisition. So in order for a chemical to be brought on base, it had to be tied to a specific task. If people were painting aircraft, we knew where that paint was going and what it was being used for, and this was all for liability. So when you start to find constituents coming on the base that you're trying to remove from the base and engineer out through different industrial processes, that was a red flag for me and really told me to do my own research. I've often wondered with the large amount of people in all branches of the military who work in an environmental facet, why they aren't coming forward. I don't think a lot of people are connecting the dots. Now, I wouldn't have stumbled upon why these constituents were being brought on base unless I had heard about geoengineering. So a lot of times I think people are supporting an operation but haven't really seen outside information to tie it to why this is going on. To see how much taxpayer dollars are used in military operations, whether they're peacetime or wartime, to see how much money is spent to reduce hazards, again, that affect human health and impact the environment, is a complete contradiction to geoengineering using wartime exemptions to not be cited through the EPA. This is a huge waste. This is fraud and waste from the U.S. government. And that this is allowed to go on to me is unbelievable.
How many more credible witnesses do we need? This documentary is so amazing. Let's just continue with them.
I think it's one of the most dangerous, diabolical things that has ever happened to us. It's the most dangerous thing short of a nuclear cataclysm. So I take it very, very seriously, and will do everything I can to try and expose the problem and encourage people to do likewise.
Well, when I was growing up, I was really a fan of Kurt Vonnegut, and Kurt wrote some remarkable works. And I later learned that most of the fodder for that work came from the work of his brother, Bernard Vonnegut, who was a scientist at GE under Irving Langmuir, the lead scientist there. That work was focused on the production of ice crystals at elevated temperature using a compound called silver iodide.
I would like to take you into the laboratory and show you a few of the experiments that led us to our outdoor experiments in converting clouds into snow. These are some which I photographed that were formed in the laboratory. This is a picture of the first cloud that we seeded back last November. Putting dry ice from a small dispenser in the bottom of the plane, under many conditions of course, full-fledged snowstorms will be produced in this way. Nature at last has permitted to do a little something about the weather.
These were something that scientists had worked on, developed through the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and were likely being deployed even today. The research done by Vonnegut and Langmuir coincided with changes in our sky. As these programs, or at least this type of research, increased, the skies started to change.
Wow.
My first real observation of those changes and real awareness of it came, I was looking up and saw patterned skies of these trails that were being laid out by planes, then developing into confluent layers that would drift perhaps hundreds of miles, changes the weather, changes the temperature around you. Also, the light intensity and the quality of light was changing. It was funny that there was not really a lot of published literature on this material. There had been some governmental reports that I had dug into. There was some evidence that this type of research was being conducted. And in fact, there was a presentation that was given where Dane Wigginton asked some questions about the materials that they were discussing and their possible role in weather modification programs.
Numerous air quality studies, including from CARB, California Air Quality Resource Board, have named submicron-sized particulates as being particularly harmful for human respiration. Through all the discussions today, I have not heard any mention of this fallout, and has this been studied, and also the effects of a highly reactive metal like aluminum on toxifying soils and waters?
The question is, what would be the effects of these materials on human health if they came down into the stratosphere, in particular small particles of aluminum? In our climate model, we looked at how much additional acid rain, acid snow you would get from the sulfur coming out of the stratosphere if you did it at a rate of 5 megatons per year or 10 megatons per year of sulfate. And it turns out that amount is so much smaller than what humans put into the troposphere on an annual basis by burning fossil fuels as a byproduct. That even in pristine areas, the soil would have a buffering capacity and it wouldn't be harmful.
So the collaborators and I working on the aerosol scheme are actually folks from Carnegie Mellon who focused on human health impacts. And while we haven't published it, that was the very first thing we did, was do the order of magnitude calculation that will in the paper, but with an expert on human health impacts about whether there could be an issue. And the answer is no, clear cut no. So for the numbers of particles burning the stratosphere are so tiny compared to the loadings on human health. There are other things that worry me a lot, like the rain on these particles in the upper troposphere, where they might affect high clouds. And for aluminum or other particles, there are a lot of toxicological things that need to get looked at seriously. But if you just think about the sheer number of particles and the human health impact of small particles, the answer is, well, we haven't published it. That was the first thing we looked at, was some of the leading experts who do epidemiological research on human health impacts, and it's not even close to being an issue.
So 10 megatons of aluminum dumped into the atmosphere will have no human health impact.
So let me be more careful here. We're separating out the toxicological, but so the alumina we've only begun to research and publish now. The question I was asking was purely about particle numbers.
Way to dodge.
We said, look at some global estimates now. We have aerosol global estimates that were built for epidemiological purposes of the global loading of aerosols in terms of health impacts. And we said, if we added on top of that what we're doing from the stratospheric aerosols, could it have any impact? And the answer is that was totally irrelevant. But that was just one particle number. We haven't done anything serious on alumina, and so there could be something terrible that we'll find tomorrow we haven't looked at.
Yeah, of course there is. Folks, I had to take pause and go look at the Arizona sky right now, and I am convinced that there's not a singular natural cloud in the sky, and it's pretty well painted. So this is ongoing. This is so crucial that we get on board. Luckily, there's all these web pages. You could just simply resort to, in the description below, all these links and how to get involved. They even have pre-written literature that we can send to our state officials, sheriffs, everyone, and start sending it throughout the family. It even seems as though you can send it through the webpage, which I would imagine they're accounting for how many people are taking this action, which could give them the information they need for legal hounds to get involved and potentially hold our officials to the fire, so to speak, because they wouldn't be immune to not addressing our grievances and potential treasonous behavior. It's our health. It's our atmosphere. It's our environment. It's our community. This is crucial, folks.
So after I saw that footage, I contacted Dane, and I started asking him some questions myself because I was interested in what he knew already. I mean, he was very forthcoming with all types of information. I realized that he had published a lot of material online, and I started perusing that material and found that, he was digging at something where there was, again, a lack of available scientific evidence, and that's where I became quite interested in contributing in any way that I could. I then, working further with Dane, and with great thanks to our contributors, was able to take a number of flights where we could sample through these condensation trails or these confluent layers that had been laid out earlier in the day.
This is awesome.
So on the first sampling mission, we started at the Baltimore-Washington International Airport. The University of Maryland has a twin-engine Cessna that is a flying laboratory. It has a sampling nozzle at the front of the plane that collects air samples prior to any contact with the plane or the engines or anything behind. Those samples are then taken through a tube pass through a filter cassette, and these filters are glass fiber filters that are pretty large pore space filters that do effectively capture ground pollution. So PM 2.5, those particle sizes are 2.5 microns, and they've done a really good job of it. But it's not really the proper equipment to completely evaluate the number of particles that might be smaller than that.
Nano.
And we're talking 10 to 100 times smaller than the PM 2.5 particles. But those do capture some of them.
They do find a way to get that, though.
We flew in an air-controlled zone and basically flew big circles trying to get to altitude, but the control towers wouldn't actually allow us to reach the altitude that we needed. They basically want you to pass through that zone. The second flight that we conducted was flown from BWI to Albany International Airport.
All right, we're just in pre-flight here. This morning, we we observed emissions from several planes, several high-altitude planes, flying between 25 and up to 40,000 feet. And the trails that were left behind these planes spread out into a confluent layer. And the low angle of the sun in the morning allowed for us to observe the polarizing effects of those particles using simple polarizing lenses.
We could see these obvious patterns that were being laid out in the sky. We were really thankful for the opportunity to be able to get up to altitude, that we could observe these materials and sample that cloud layer. Our intention was to do a point-to-point sampling mission where we could actually reach altitudes, approaching 20,000 feet. Unfortunately, on our flight from BWI to Albany, the layer that we observed was at 27,000 feet, and I think we made it to about 23,000 feet, perhaps, and so we were below that confluent layer.
But just wait, they get it.
We landed, had lunch, they refueled the plane.
We have two blank control samples. One was taken prior to the flight, one was taken after the flight. So we should have, again, two blank samples, and actually three samples, one on ascent, one at level flight, and then slight ascent from 17,000 to 21,000, and then changed the filter and took another sample, a third sample, as we descended.
And then on the return mission, though, we noticed that that cloud layer had descended from 25 or 27,000 feet to about 17,000 feet.
It's not a cloud layer.
Through that, and we sampled below the cloud layer. And I'm saying cloud, I mean an induced cloud layer. Yeah. We sampled through that confluent layer and above it.
The basic building blocks of climate engineering are to saturate the atmosphere with electrically conductive light scattering particles and polymers, particles like aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese. These particles are then manipulated with extraordinarily powerful radio frequency microwave transmissions.
Ooh, this is good.
Transmissions that can heat the upper layers of the atmosphere, like the ionosphere, that are used to create pressure zones that steer upper level wind currents, which then steer weather systems. These particulates, when they are manipulated with these frequencies, can literally move air masses. This is an integral part of climate engineering that is not known or being acknowledged by many. Extraordinarily powerful and dangerous radio frequency microwave transmissions.
Yeah, look at that. These radars.
Electromagnetic fields are energy sources. And they're going to be interacting with moisture in the air or our bodies or whatever.
Wow.
And therefore, it's not at all surprising that you're going to find some movement in relation to exposure of weather patterns to electromagnetic fields.
When you have things like HAARP that can send electromagnetic waves into the air column, if you send, lower frequencies, you can calm it all down and you can cool it. Or you can excite it and you can heat it up. So there's complete control of temperature within the environment.
In 1985, Bernard Eastman applied for patents. Many claim that these patents have become the blueprint for HAARP, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program.
HAARP is a large antenna where we beam radio frequency energy up into the upper atmosphere.
Applications discussed in the patents included destroying missiles.
All tied together, folks.
Control and disruption were included. There were some other ideas, both to possibly modify weather.
What we can do with an antenna is change the portion of the sky into which we insert the energy.
HAARP's combined antennae generate a focused billion-watt high-frequency radio beam, which penetrates the lower ionosphere and interacts with the currents of the auroral electrojet.
in certain applications, the military acknowledges that it can literally lift the ionosphere. And what they say is it's not a problem, it's a short period of time, yet when you lift the ionosphere up, the lower atmosphere rushes in and fills that void, which changes localized weather patterns.
At its biggest size suggested, if you beamed it for an hour and a half, that would equal the energy in a hydrogen bomb.
Wow.
HARP is only one installation of perhaps 100 that are on that scale around the globe.
Hundreds.
You can create high-pressure domes. In the northern hemisphere, that creates a clockwise spin, just like the pulley. That allows them to steer the upper-level winds into nearly any configuration they wish. So the areas that are under that high-pressure dome fry. They fry. Take a look at that round bubble. Is that not telling? That's a high-pressure dome parked right over the top of us that ensures nothing can flow in. You would never see this meteorologically 20 years ago. Never.
When you have two things that have the same mechanism of action, one would expect that their effects would be either additive or more than additive, that being synergistic. So when we're talking about weather patterns, so you have fog, you have water droplets, you have water in the air. When those water droplets are irradiated with microwaves, they're going to do the same thing they do in our body. They're going to generate reactive oxygen species.
I should have paused on all those loops, folks. Like how that's not even normal flight patterns. Aircraft are designed, it's a traveling, right? Point A, point B. So technically it's done in a straight line. So why are they doing these really unorthodox flight patterns? If it wasn't to aerosolize and mass dump in selective areas. And you saw how gridded and patterned it was. Like, breathe it in, take a deep breath, not here to spread doom and gloom. This is easily addressed, just simply pen to paper, and let's initiate bans right here in Arizona and every state. And we're given the tools to do so. More on that. All right, what are we? We're going to go maybe another 15 minutes, and then we're going to break this up into 2 episodes.
And when nanoparticles are in that water, they're going to do the same thing they do in our body. They're going to generate reactive oxygen species. So at minimum, one would expect that these effects would be additive, with the possibility that it could be more than additive.
And if frequencies do that to particulates, again, what's
cool.
it doing to us? What's it doing to the web of life?
Good question.
Anything that's alive has water in it in some form or another. What's happening to us with this? And watch what happens to a flow of water when it's exposed to frequency.
That's mild frequency, folks. Just what it's doing there. And people don't want to, they want to believe the talking heads on, we've discovered 8 new type of clouds. Naturally, you can't have that grid-like formation like we saw, all those ripples, right? It's reacting to the nano aluminums, barium, these particles that through HARP are clearly having an impact than just being aerosolized and sprayed up there. This is on the small scale. So there's visual evidence, there's real document. You connect the dots, it's clear. And once again, we're not to stop on any of these aspects to life, going beyond even chemtrail spray. We're to continue to demand transparency with everything. They've lost governments, the 3-letter agencies, they've lost all trust, and as they should. I mean, it's important for any agency to actually have the trust of the people. But how do they gain that back? I personally feel we need to gain transparency to all these aspects. Let's just start here. And dare I say, we will have such an uptick with our health that it will become easy to address transparency in these other arenas.
Very hard to believe. And when you feel that with particulates, the effect is even more profound. There's a radio
more profound with more particulates. So even as we're absorbing this material, we can't even fathom as to the impact these radiation frequencies are having in our minds, with our hormones and with our bodies. For frick's sakes, folks, we live in a generation where men believe they can be women just by a gender crisis. Unbelievable. You can paint stripes on a cow all you want. It doesn't make it a zebra. Let's get back to reality. But that's just one aspect that clearly, wow, we're out of the realm of reality and borderline insanity. And I believe personally, this has a big role to play with that.
Radio frequency transmitter that, based on the signal transmission direction, is isolating precipitation and blocking out a whole section of precipitation.
Wow.
These are one of the radio frequency transmitters, and they're being put up all over the country, all over the world, wherever the grid power will support them. Again, you saw the radio frequency transmission carving out a 90-degree inside corner. That's the overall effect in the end. Completely unnatural. There's not a meteorologist that doesn't know this is going on. No chance.
Wow.
Many asked this question: can cyclones, can hurricanes be manipulated? The short answer is yes. Project Cirrus. The U.S. military has been engaged in hurricane manipulation programs since at least 1947. And these programs have been ongoing ever since, although the U.S. military denies it. They claim they stopped this research. That is a blatant lie. Geoengineeringwatch.org has captured film footage of the radio frequency transmissions being used to manipulate the atmospheric particulates sprayed by climate engineering operations in order to steer and direct hurricanes. They can be manipulated to a degree that few can comprehend. We have NASA satellite images available at geoengineeringwatch.org that show extraordinary atmospheric manipulation off the west coast of Africa, where cyclones in the Atlantic basin originate. There's no theory, there's no hypothesis, there's no conjecture. Cyclone manipulation is absolutely, positively being done.
Some of this technology actually came out of the stealth program. Stealth was the idea that you would try to reduce the amount of radar energy that would be reflected off of an aircraft. You could put particles of metal into the paint itself. These particles would then absorb the energy. But if you put that up into the air and then you broadcast a signal that is tuned to the exact frequency that matches the size, and this is the key, all of these particles are the same exact size, so they respond to a specific frequency. So when you transmit this frequency, you can get all those particles to heat up. And if that mass of air has moisture in it, any kind of humidity at all, it all rises and expands. So this is how you can actually generate a weather system.
A primary aspect of climate engineering is the climate engineer's ability to manufacture winter weather with patented processes of chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. In doing so, they can seed cloud moisture with what is termed endothermic reacting elements, energy absorbing elements that create a cold, dense layer of air that sinks to the surface of the planet and creates a shallow layer of cold, perhaps a few hundred feet thick, that creates the illusion of winter weather on a planet that's in total meltdown. So the surface temperatures are in fact very cold, sometimes astoundingly cold, but it's a shallow surface layer. Manufacturing winter weather events that are then sensationalized by corporate media, dividing the population, again, confusing them as to the true state of the planet and the true temperatures on planet Earth. They have focused oftentimes on particular regions, like in 2014 in Boston on the east coast of the US, creating snowstorm after snowstorm after snowstorm with chemically nucleated moisture and creating sensationalized headlines from that event.
100 million Americans have been hit by a winter storm, packing pretty much everything in the weather arsenal.
And convincing much of the population that there was nothing wrong with the climate, that there was in fact record cold in some places, and thus in places where there was record warmth even during winter months, people tend to ignore that. As the planetary warming becomes a runaway event, the chemical ice nucleation elements that have been seeded into cloud moisture reach the surface before freezing. Thus, so-called frozen rain and ice storms are increasingly becoming the norm. How many know of the ice balls showing up on the shores of Lake Michigan, covering beaches, often 75 pounds or more, occurring at times on water that is 40 degrees plus Fahrenheit? How does that happen? From chemical ice nucleation. This is nothing short of winter weather warfare, complete with destructive ice accumulations from the chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding and dangerously slick, snow-like frozen material that contains surfactants. They're used in climate engineering chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding operations in order to reduce particle coagulation, i.e. to keep the climate engineering elements from sticking together and forming larger particulates that would sink faster to the planet, which would not be conducive to the winter weather warfare scenario.
Oh my gosh.
The cryosphere, Earth's ice deposits, are melting at a pace that is unprecedented in the geologic past. The true magnitude of the planetary meltdown has been masked by statistical falsification. The climate engineers have attempted to hide this fact from populations. In order to mask the true severity of polar meltdown from populations, the climate engineers have utilized methods of sea surface ice nucleation. The effect of these operations can easily be distinguished on satellite images. The paradox with sea surface ice nucleation is this: the climate engineers are actually putting a lid or a cap on oceans that are already too warm for natural ice nucleation to occur. In doing so, the climate engineers are, in effect, sealing the heat in the oceans, thus increasing the overall heating of the planet.
Wow. So the ones standing up a climate change pandemic, a whole hoax, are the ones creating all this, let's say, talking points to push their hoax. Unbelievable. Let's go a little longer here, folks. Wow.
It's another larger specimen of black oak. It's mid-February. It's already leafing out. It's 2 months ahead of when it should be leafing out. The leaves last fall stayed on the trees, and in late November, December, when a certain series of rains comes, we've seen this the last 4 years, all the leaves on the deciduous trees wad up dead, but still hang on the tree. As you see lower down in this tree, that's what we have. It appears to us as if some sort of defoliant is included in the aerosol spray mix, and we know fruit farmers have been using this type of method to cause their orchards to go dormant for years. This is because the temperatures have been rising so progressively.
Defoliants remove the foliage or leaves from the plant. A week after defoliation spraying, the plants stand dry and almost leafless.
Defoliation, a maneuver designed to peel back the cover from which the Viet Cong spring ambushes on Allied supply convoys and troop movements.
Decomposition of forest floor duff, the materials on the forest floor, leaves, pine needles, twigs and sticks, is now almost non-existent. The soil microbiome has been devastated.
Wow.
The root systems of trees and forest flora are dying off, just as the crowns of the trees are also dying off. Climate engineering contamination is not only killing soil microorganisms, it is also causing trees to shut down nutrient uptake, which in turn initiates a slow, protracted death of the forest. Because of Earth's collapsing ozone layer, intense UV radiation is causing the stomata, the respiratory ports of trees, to shut down. Thus, trees don't respirate. They can't feed. They're simply dormant. The forest no longer smells like a forest because the trees are not breathing. Even during the spring and summer months, an increasing number of trees are growthless. What we are left with is stagnant, silent, dry, dead, and dying forests that are just a spark away from total incineration.
Every single person that I've talked to so far has made the mention that I don't know why it's doing what it's doing. It's burning differently. It's burning more aggressive than it has in years past. And I know we say that every year, but it's unprecedented. It's burning in every direction all at the same time.
The single greatest factor that is creating the conditions for the unprecedented wildfires all over the globe is climate engineering. Why? Because climate engineering is disrupting the hydrological cycle, i.e. the rain cycle. Climate engineering is destroying the ozone layer, which is bombarding forests with incredibly intense UV radiation, killing them from the top down.
Wow.
Climate engineering is ionizing the atmosphere, making it more electrically conductive, and this in turn facilitates more dry lightning, igniting yet more fires. Climate engineering is blanketing forest foliage and forest floors with a highly incendiary dust, aluminum nanoparticulates, barium, polymers. This further adds to the flammability of the forest. From every conceivable direction, climate engineering is the single greatest causal factor in regard to the epic forest fires that are consuming forests all over the globe. The equilibrium of our planet has been completely obliterated. And there are now feedback loops that have been triggered, as many as 50. It means once you knock a domino over, that domino knocks over a larger domino and still a larger domino. And the process continues, and that is now occurring on planet Earth. And now we have methane releasing from formerly frozen methane hydrate deposits all over the globe, in Siberian tundra, on the Arctic seafloor. Methane is escaping, rising into the atmosphere, and covering the planet like a layer of glass. Methane over a 10-year time horizon is from 100 to 120 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. There's enough methane in these deposits to turn our planet into Venus many times over, and it is releasing now. And climate engineering, in the attempt to mask what is unfolding, has actually further fueled the process.
Look
Climate
at
engineering
that.
alters upper level wind current. That in turn...
Come on, ask yourself, how could we emit more of a plume of smoke behind such a tiny aircraft than that? How could we perfect it? We can't, because that is it being right before our eyes, fully perfected. That, my friends, it's intentionally being done. Let's let this guy finish his point.
Alters ocean currents. Now we have warm water pumping into the Arctic in places it should not be, causing massive methane blowouts that have to be seen to be believed. They can be seen when they occur on terrestrial areas like the Siberian tundra. Massive craters that look like something from a massive nuclear war.
The question is, that people should be asking, is if this is going on, why is nobody talking about it?
Under the security classification.
That is a great question. We're going to go ahead and stop on that for the day. Let me change audio, because I need to experiment and see now if I hit the soundtrack, if it doesn't reverberate. Is it clear? This is so annoying. I am not the most pleased, let's say, consumer or customer of StreamYard. I might need to find a different streaming service. I guess that just means more time in the studio. But holy frick, folks, words. Can you tell? My neurological is being impacted. I swear. This is no joke. What is it that's causing a deterioration of my health, more so being down here in the valley within city limits than being in nature? I don't believe I could hide in nature from this war tactic of what's being sprayed in our atmosphere. But there's you could see with the frequency warfare and how it magnifies both tactics. That, I believe, is what I'm feeling down here. There's a lot more frequency down in this environment than out at nature. So that's kind of my conclusion, folks. You can come to your own conclusions. There's a lot of facts and evidence to back that up. But I truly, as they covered a lot of aspects to the impacts of this, we truly cannot even fathom as to how detrimental this is. Let me make note. We are sitting on 59:57, almost an hour on the dot. So we could pick up. Hopefully, I got the time and, let's say, the ability to tackle this tomorrow. I really personally didn't feel like I could even show up effective enough today with my neurological challenges and the energy and the lethargic and the tinnitus and ringing in my ears, all these things. Like, we can't even fathom, especially as we accumulate these toxins within our body, as to how it's going to impact us on a cellular level, neurologically, our digestive, our organs, skin, mood, sleep, everything. There were reports the other night of a high frequency attack. And it's crazy as I went around trying to get my finger on the pulse with them people in my life and how they slept the other night, just the night before last. And surprisingly, it was about 50-50. 50% of them were really reporting they had a crazy disruption. They were abruptly awoken. They couldn't get back to sleep. Many of them got up, even made pots of coffee, did dishes, all sorts of things, like just couldn't go back to bed, laid back down, couldn't fall back asleep. Like, what is that about? You know, you can come to your own conclusions, but it's important that ultimately we're cognizant as to how we're feeling, what's going on. That's why I feel this is so crucial. Let's just get bans in place. And whether this continues or not, we can go from there. And there's no better sources that I have found other than, well, we'll get into it, but let's address this image. I truly feel this is the problem we're now faced with. Folks are no longer seeing this as a serious problem. And that is the result of this actual war tactic, that these chemtrails are effectively working, diminishing, utterly destroying our cognitive functions to even properly acknowledge that this is one of the sources to the issues we're facing. So, American for a Clean Atmosphere, right here, it goes over every state. Tennessee, right here, actually passing legislation, governor signing into law prohibiting geoengineering experiments. It's kind of a lighter passing. It's like 10,000 per what would you call it, occurrence. But these other ones are $500,000 fines with felony charges, more so than the misdemeanor in Tennessee. So felony charges and years imprisonment. So let's support these. Check this out. If there's any state, get behind this. If it isn't happening in your state, well, let's get that fired up. And through these other sources like zeroengineering.com, there's a take action. You can literally go to your country. You could go to any of the 50 states. Right here, send your representative this letter. And I feel it's important to fill it out here and hit send, because now we're giving them the data as to how many of us are in the know? How many of us actually want to see an end to this war tactic that is clearly diminishing our function? I'm feeling it. I know it. It starts with educating ourselves, being brought into the know. They're standing up so much propaganda to impede on people's ability to even acknowledge what truly is happening here. That's where it's so crucial. We send out information like this. If it's not through on Muzzle Chat and all my rude disruptions, please send the direct source. Right here through geoengineeringwatch.com. You can click on the full dimming, watch it uninterrupted. Let's just get this information out, but be sure to provide them this link here so there's action we can take. If you come up with any more effective ideas on addressing this and pushing this along faster, that is what ultimately what we're trying to do. We're trying to see results, gain the proper outcomes, which it's so crucial. Once we gain the momentum on cleaning our air and putting these bans in place, well, let's shift that momentum into our water, then our food, so many other things, maybe even the frequency. It's important that we start allocating funds to get the proper testing done of our current environments before we roll out a whole internet of things. That is insanity. We're just going to take Motorola and all the companies' word for it, and the lack of information, the lack of transparency with conflicts of interest. Come on. SOS, save our skies. I will be honest, I have yet to really look into this webpage, but I already like what I'm seeing, and I think this is a really amazing resource that we're to dive into and see what all it's offering. And then I have yet to really dive into this, but there's literally a climate viewer of maps, all sorts of crucial information, imagery up here where could help us come to our own conclusions in doing our own research. Whatever you find on this topic, please reach out to me on muzzlechat@gmail.com. I'm just on fire to addressing this. Otherwise, if my function personally deteriorates any more than it is right now, I'm going to have to get back out in nature and at least try to eliminate the frequency aspect to the poison that's raining down on us from the skies. I don't know how, to our own detriment, we would take the liars' talking points, the liars' propagandas, the liars that lied about the COVID-19 shot, safe and effective, liars that demonized ivermectin, HCQ, doctors that were coming out with protocols with zinc and vitamin D, vitamin C, natural ways of bringing health into during the pandemic. Those are the same dang sources that are fighting against this very narrative. The only reason why they would fight against it is because they are banking on this investment in a certain outcome, which is the dumbing down of you and me. I'm convicted on this. I leave this other microphone open to opposing views. Let's have proper discussion. It's crucial that we get to the bottom of this. I love you all. I want the best health for us all. I believe if we could accomplish that, we've lost what normal is. Look at all the challenges we're faced with: chronic illness, disease, obesity, diabetes, Alzheimer's. The list goes on and on. Chronic immune deficiencies. It's leading to hundreds and hundreds of, diagnosis, not really getting to the root of the issues. If we don't address these levels of attack, wouldn't we constantly be caught in a trap? I often use the dog chasing its tail. There's only going to be so many band-aids that breathe life back into us. I don't think with this onslaught we could even really move the needle and get back to that life of normalcy until we stop these attacks. We can't hide from it. So let's stop projecting as though we love our loved ones, and let's fulfill that. Let's get our priorities straight. Football, jobs, even so many of these aspects to our life really shouldn't be in the top priority slot when this level of warfare is playing out before us. Let's be real with ourselves. So let's just do our part. No one can shoulder the burden alone. It's important that we all show up and support one another. So above all, smash that like button, share this with everyone you know, and let's get the ball rolling together. That is why we're putting this time, folks. Not just to live entirely self-serving and selfishly. Let's fulfill the love we have for all God's children and address these issues, aka being done by the synagogue of Satan. There's literally evil in this life, as Jesus depicted a god of this world, a prince, and it's clear that his minions that have really achieved a level of control and power in this world. Holy smokes. I love the image of the ants. Like, what, the ant movie, I don't even remember really what it says specifically, but something along the lines of, don't tell them, like they outnumber us 100 to 1. If we figured this out, that my friends is why they're censoring this topic 100%, and putting so much money and risk to them on infringing on our free speech to keep us in the dark. Because if we really knew, we would assemble in such a way we could tear down this two-tiered infrastructure, this ruling class that clearly doesn't have, they give us snippets. They're like, oh, become dependent. Socialist ideas is to equality, whatever. Equality, quack. I wanted to put quack in there. For everyone, like, get out of here with that communist dictatorship, like, shenanigans. Let's breathe life, and we'll all seize this opportunity we're given in this life and really have enjoyment and health again. Anyway, I'm just a rambling man at this point. I can't wait to dive more into this, hopefully really soon. Just know the intent. I know what we're capable of together, and I want to see the best version of you above all. And I just know naturally that will create the momentum to really address the bigger issues we're faced with. So, bigger issues. What's bigger than attacks directly on our health and all our loved ones? My goodness. Until next time, that's it, folks. Take care of yourself.